Most mysterious unsolved disappearances can cause people to take extra precautions while alone or someplace unfamiliar. But there's something even more eerie when people go missing from plain sight. We like to think of ourselves as safe when family members are nearby or somewhere as mundane as the workplace. These 5 cases prove that isn't always the case. Number 5. The unexplained disappearance of Taisha Patrice Bell in 2003 left 2 small girls without their mother. Taisha was at the apartment she shared with her younger sister, Latasha, when she received a phone call in the evening of May 8th. Latasha watched her sister step outside to take the call, leaving her personal belongings in the apartment. It seemed as if she had just left to talk privately with whoever was on the phone. She never came back inside. When Taisha hadn't returned home the next morning, Latasha called their mother, Lorna. At first, Lorna wasn't too concerned, but over the next few days, the family left dozens of voice messages on her phone, trying to get a hold of her, and received no response. She was reported missing on May 10th, and police immediately suspected foul play. Taisha had 2 daughters, and the father of her youngest child became a key person of interest after he lied to police about how often they spoke. He told police he hadn't spoken to Taisha in months, but phone records showed they'd spoken 6 times a day on the day that Taisha disappeared. It actually emerged he may have been the last person to speak to her, and was possibly the person she was speaking to when she stepped out of the apartment. The unnamed man was also supporting Taisha financially after she lost her job shortly before her disappearance. Police searched his home with cadaver dogs and drilled holes in the floor of his basement, but no signs of Taisha were found. Taisha's family do not believe she would have willingly left her family behind, and her disappearance was completely out of character. She'd gone shopping for clothes for her daughter the day before she disappeared. However, Taisha may have suspected something was wrong. Her mother told journalists that Taisha had been acting differently before she went missing and was withdrawn, but she never found out why, and it's not certain this was related to her disappearance. Her mother believes Taisha could still be alive and hopes one day her granddaughters will have their mother back. Number 4. Trevally Nevins was last seen near her home in Wales on June 16, 1990, having left a note at her antiques shop to say she would be back in 2 minutes. It had been a relatively busy morning. Around 25 people had called in since the shop had opened at 9:30 a.m. They all seemed to be in good spirits, and there was no sign of any trouble. Trevally left the shop at 12:40 p.m., leaving behind her note. She bought a banana and an apple from a shop on High Street and seemed to be making her way back to the shop. The peel from the banana was found in a trash bin at the shop, though nobody ever saw Trevally there after she left for lunch. She also didn't remove the note. She was last seen at 2:30 p.m. near her home, about a 5-minute walk from the antiques shop. After the disappearance was discovered, police interviewed more than 300 people to try to track her down. Searches of the nearby river, canals, and mine shafts were carried out, but produced no results. Despite every household in the town being interviewed, the one person police were keen to speak to couldn't be traced. An unknown, smartly dressed man was seen talking to Trevally in the shop not long before she left. An artist's impression was circulated, but he couldn't be identified. Sightings of Trevally were reported in London, France, and even Australia, but police believe she never left Wales of her own free will. Her handbag and personal belongings had been left at the shop, and her bank account hadn't been touched since the disappearance. The case was reopened in 2001 in the hopes of new forensic techniques that could produce new leads. Trevally's husband, Richard, was arrested in June of that year, but was released without a charge not long after. So far, Richard has been the only arrest made in the investigation, but that could change. Last year, 2 brothers claimed to have heard information relating to the case and told police Trevally's body had been dumped under a golf club bar. Police immediately searched the club but found no human remains. Even so, the new attention on the case could bring new leads and hopefully bring her family closure. Number 3. In April of 1959, 57-year-old Bruce Campbell left his motel room in the middle of the night wearing little more than his green pajamas and was never seen again. Bruce had been ill for a few days before his disappearance. He and his wife, Mabelita, were traveling to visit their son, Bruce Jr., and newborn grandchild, but Bruce suddenly became disoriented and confused while on the road. They stopped off at a small family-owned motel, and Bruce Jr. called a doctor to check up on his father. Bruce was given sleeping medication, but it was a few days before his condition improved. On April 14th, Bruce Jr. and the family visited the father. He said Bruce was getting better. He was now acting rationally, but he still seemed disoriented. That night, Bruce grew paranoid. Twice before 1 a.m., he woke to call his wife to ask if their car was secure. The car was parked in the middle of the motel parking lot, right outside the room they were renting. She assured him each time that it was secure before going back to sleep. Around 2:15 a.m., Mabelita woke again to find the bed beside her empty. Bruce wasn't in the motel room at all, though his wallet and the rest of his belongings were where he had left them. The door was unlatched, though the desk clerk on duty said he hadn't seen Bruce pass his window. The car also hadn't been touched, meaning Bruce must have left by foot. He wasn't wearing any shoes, though. Mabelita immediately called the police and a massive search got underway. Local firefighters searched a nearby creek and hundreds of people covered a 6-mile radius around the motel. It was at first thought a 6'4" man wearing just his green pajamas would have been spotted wandering through the nearby towns, but no sightings were ever reported. Motorists informed police about tall hitchhikers they'd passed in the area, but none were Bruce. The Campbell family spent their savings on private detectives to try to track down their missing relative, and even the FBI later became involved, but no information about Bruce's whereabouts was ever found. Number 2. Cynthia Adams vanished from the law office where she worked early on August 4th, 1981. She left behind most of her belongings, including a romance novel she'd been reading, which was open on her desk. Cynthia was last seen at her desk at around 9:45 a.m. 15 minutes later, calls to the office were left unanswered. By the time Cynthia's colleagues arrived, the office was empty, though her car was still parked outside. There was no sign of forced entry. In fact, there appeared to be nothing out of the ordinary at all. The air conditioner, a radio, and all the lights were on in the office, which was locked from the inside. The only thing that was out of place was Cynthia. Cynthia usually left a note if she ever needed to leave the phones unattended, but her colleagues found no note. She hadn't put the phones on hold either. Police immediately suspected foul play. Cynthia was receiving strange phone calls at her workplace for weeks before her disappearance, which her colleagues said had deeply disturbed her. It had gotten to the point where she had nightmares about being attacked by a man, and she had an emergency buzzer installed at her desk. The office door was also kept locked at all times. In the middle of these ominous messages, somebody had spray painted the words, "I love you, Cindy," by GW on a wall, which also worried her. However, this seemed to be unrelated, as a man later admitted to leaving the message, but said it was meant for a different woman. Police suspected Cynthia had been abducted, possibly while on her way to fetch something from her car, although there are still some holes in this theory. Others believe it's possible she may have faked her abduction to start a new life. The romance novel she left on her desk was open to where she'd finished reading, a scene which the main character was abducted. Some believe this was more than just a coincidence, and Cynthia instead wanted to escape. However, there doesn't seem to be any evidence for this, and Cynthia was actually looking forward to attending a Christian college with her boyfriend in just a few weeks' time. A week after the disappearance, Toledo police received a phone call from an anonymous woman who claimed Cynthia had been kidnapped and locked in a basement. No useful evidence was given though, and the basement or the woman was never found. Since the disappearance 40 years ago, there have been countless theories and leads, but so far none have led police any closer to finding the woman. Number 1. Ryan Stucky went missing while on his way home from a party in Sun Peaks, British Columbia in February of 2018. The Sun Peaks area is known for its heavy snow in the winter, which is one of the reasons why Ryan had traveled north for the season. The 20-year-old had moved to the area in December the previous year to spend the winter snowboarding and picked up seasonal work as a ski lift operator at one of the resorts. On Friday, February 16th, Ryan and a few housemates went to a party which was being hosted at a house only a few minutes' walk from their home. One of the housemates Ryan was with grew tired and left in the early hours of Saturday morning. Ryan and the second housemate stayed at the party a little longer, but decided to call it a night just after 2 a.m. Ryan was seen standing up, likely to grab his coat and go. The second roommate was seen leaving the party at around 2:10 a.m., believing Ryan was right behind him. Whether Ryan left the party then or not isn't 100% certain, but he definitely wasn't with the housemate by the time he arrived home just a few minutes later, and Ryan hadn't been seen since. Ryan was reported missing later that day when he didn't show up for work. Thousands of people were involved in the search for Ryan, and sniffer dogs were brought in to try to find a scent trail, but turned up nothing. Helicopters and rescue workers with experience in the Sun Peaks were utilized, but there was no clothing, footprints, or body ever to be found. At first, it was suspected Ryan may have fallen into a gully which was covered by snow, but when the snow cleared later that year, there was still no trace of the missing man. A former investigator, Brian Smith, believed Ryan's life came to a violent end. Having watched an interview with one of Ryan's friends, Smith believes something happened to make the friend afraid for his life. The fact no trace of Ryan has ever been found in the 2 years since he went missing also suggests someone else must have been involved, taking Ryan out of the area for one reason or another. Police have said they have no reason to believe foul play was involved, but haven't ruled anything out. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.